So the next thing is function expressions. So in JavaScript, a function is not a magical language structure, but a special kind of value, and the syntax that we have used is called function declaration. As you can see here, this is function declaration, and there is another syntax for creating a function that is called a function expression, and it allows us to create a new function in the middle of an expression. So for example, we use this is a syntax of creating any function in the middle of any expression. So here we have created a variable say hi, and it's getting a value. The new function created as function, and it says hello. So as the function creation happened in the context of the assignment expression, so to the right side of equal to one, this is a function expression. So there is no name after the function keyword, that is omitting a name is allowed in function expressions. Here we immediately assign it to the variable, so the meaning of these code samples in the example, that is create a function and put in the expression variables, that is say hi. And now in more advanced situations that we will come across later, a function may be created and immediately called or scheduled for a later execution and not stored anywhere, thus remaining anonymous. So function is a value, and let's reiterate, no matter how the function is created, a function is a value. Both examples that I have shown here store a function in the say hi variable, and we can even print out the value using alert. For example, here I set alert to print the value. Let's see if it works or not. See, it works. So please note that the last line does not run the function. This line does not run the function because there are no parentheses after say hi. So there are programming languages where any mention of a function name causes its execution, but JavaScript is not like that. In JavaScript, a function is a value, so we can deal with it as a value. So the code here shows its string representation, which is the source code. Surely a function is a special value in the sense that we can call it like say hi, but it's still a value, so we can work with it like the other kinds of values. And we can copy a function to another variable. So for example, here I have copied a function in another variable. So this should work. Let us try it out. See, it says hello, and it's working. So here the function declaration, that this is the function declaration, creates a function and puts it into the variable named say hi, and here it copies it into the variable function that is func, and there are no parentheses after say hi. So if there were then function that is func equal to say parentheses, we would write the result of call say hi into the func, but not the function say hi itself. So now the function can be called as both say hi and func. As you can see here, it can be called as this way or this way. So we would also have used a function expression to declare say hi in the first line. And next is callback function. So let's look at the more examples of passing functions as values and using function expressions. So we will write a function and it asks question yes or no, and with these three parameters. So the first one is question, that is text of the question, and it's set yes. So function to run if the answer is yes, and no function to run if the answer is no. The function should ask the question, and depending on the user's answer, call yes or no. Let me show you an example. See, here it is the question asked. Question, that is yes or no. So in practice, such functions are quite useful, and the major difference between a real-life ask and the example here is the real-life functions use more complex ways to interact with the user than a simple confirm. And in the browser, such function usually draws a nice looking question window, but that's not the case over here. Let's run it and show it to you. See here, so do you agree? If you say okay, it says you agree, then cancel. Here is the execution. You cancel the execution. So this is how this works. So the argument here show okay and show cancel of ask are called callback functions. These are called callback functions or just callbacks, and the idea is that we pass a function and expect it to be called back later if necessary. In our case, show okay becomes the callback for yes answered and show cancel for no answer. And we can use a function expressions to write the same function much shorter. So let me show you what this can be written in a much shorter way. Now, as you can see here functions are declared right inside the ask. This is ask call. So they have no name and are so called anonymous, and such functions are not accessible outside of the ask because they are not assigned to variables, but that's just what we want here. So such code appears in the script very naturally, and it's in the spirit of JavaScript. So the next one is function expression and function declaration versus function declaration. So let's formulate the key difference between function declarations and expressions. So for the syntax or how we usually differentiate them. So let me show you this. Okay, so here it was function declaration, and this is how we declare a function, and this is function expression. So the most subtle difference is when the function is created by the JavaScript. So a function expression is created when the execution reaches it and is only useful only from that moment, and a function declaration can be called earlier than it's defined. And in strict mode, when a function declaration is within a code block, it's visible everywhere inside the block but not of the outside. The next is arrow functions. So there's another very simple and concise syntax for creating functions that's often better than function expression. It's called the arrow functions because let me show you the syntax of the arrow function. So here is an example. So here is the syntax of the arrow function. So this creates a function named func, and that accepts argument 1 to argument n. Then writes the expression on the right side with their use and returns its result. In other words, it's the shorter version of the. This is the shorter version of this. So let's create a concrete example. See, now as you can see, A, B, this A plus 2 means a function that accepts two arguments named A and B, and upon the execution propagates the expression A plus B and returns the result. And if we have only one argument, then the concept around the parameters can be omitted, making it even shorter. Let me save this and let me show you it's working or not. See, it's working. So next one is multi-line arrow functions. So let me show you an example of a multi-line arrow function. Sometimes we need something a little bit more complex, like multiple expressions and statements, and it is also possible, but we wouldn't use them in curly braces, then use a normal return below them. And let's try to run it. See what it says. So the next thing is conditional branching, that is if statement. So sometimes we need to perform different actions based on different conditions. So to do that, we can use the if statement and the conditional operator, that is question mark. So that's also called a question mark operator. So let me show you the example that the if statement evaluates a condition in parentheses, and if the result is true, executes a block of code. So let's try out an example. That equals to prompt in which here it's a question mark over here. You can write anything, and this is the conditional statement if, and this is the condition in the parentheses. So if this condition is true, then it will execute the block of code. Then it will execute this one. Okay. So let's save it and try it out. So let's say I type 2015 and it says you are right. And let's see if I write anything else. It doesn't work because that block of code was executed. So the condition is a simple equality. Here it checks if the year is 2015 or not. But it can be much more complex. That is, if we want to execute more than one statement, we have to wrap our code block inside curly braces. So our code block is, we need to write a code in these curly braces. So we can, in this way, we can execute more than one thing. So we recommend wrapping your code down with curly braces every time we use an if statement, even if there is only one statement that is good, because it improves readability, as you can see. Down the next one is boolean conversion. So the if statement evaluates the expression in its parentheses and converts the result to a boolean. So we remember the boolean conversions. So let me give you an example. So let's see. If 0, that is 0 is false, and I can write it 1 is it's true. So in this way the condition will always be true if we write 1, and the condition will always be false if we write 0. And we can also pass a pre-evaluated boolean value to it. For example, let's say let condition equals to let equals equals to 2015. So this is the condition, and in if we need to pass the variable. So in this way we can pre-evaluate the boolean. So if the next one is else statement. So if and if else works together, it will be easier to perform any action if there are different conditions. So the if statement may contain an optional else block, and it executes when the condition is falsy. So for example, alright, let here equals to not here, and in the statement we pass the variable here. This is my condition. So alright, alert, we are right, and else needs another block. So here alert, let me show it to the wrong. Let's save it. Let's check this is. See, if I write the year is 2015, it prompts the message you are right. And if I type anything else, it will say you are wrong. See, earlier this message was not appearing because else statement was not there. So there are several conditions in else if. So sometimes we would like to test several variants of condition. The else if clause lets us do that. So I'm now going to give you an example of else if. See, here I took a variable that is year and I prompted him. So, and the next one is I checked the condition that if year is less than 2015, it will show the alert too early, and if the year is greater than 2015, it will say too late, and if we write 2015, it will show exactly. So let's save it and test it out on all three of our conditions. See, I write 2015, it says exactly, and it puts 2010, it says too early, and 2016, it says too late. So all our conditions are working. So this is how we use the else if statement. So here in JavaScript, first checks here is less than 205, and if that is false, it goes to the next condition to check if the year is greater than 205, and if that is also false, it shows the last alert, that is exactly. So there can be more else if blocks. The final else is optional. And now the next one is the conditional operator. So sometimes we need to assign a variable depending on the condition. So for example of a conditional operator, let me just show you an example. So here I have taken a variable named access allowed and a variable age that asks for age, and it checks if the age is greater than 18, it says access allowed, and if the age is not greater than 18, access is not allowed. So let's save it. Let's check 18. It says false because it was greater than 18, and 18, because we wrote here greater than 18, we didn't wrote greater than or equal to 18. So the condition to be true needs to be greater than 18. So it solves as true. So the so-called conditional or question mark operator lets us do that in a shorter and simpler way. So the operator is represented by a question mark. So sometimes it's called ternary, and because the operator has 3 operands, it is actually the one and the only operator in the JavaScript which has that many. So let me give you an example. So that is the syntax and the example. So here we insert our variable, and this is the condition, and this is our conditional operator, and these are the results. So now we can have multiple conditional operators. So a sequence of question mark operators can return a value that depends on more than one condition. So for example of a multiple, this is an example for a multiple condition operator. So a sequence of question mark operators can return a value that depends on more than one condition. So here the first one is that if the age is less than 3, the second condition is age is greater than 18, and the last one is if the age is greater than 100. So we can write it in this way using the multiple conditional operator that I have used here. And let me show you. So if we write 18, it says greetings, and if I write 2, it says hi baby, and greater than 100, it says water and baby. So our conditional operator is working. So our conditional operator is working. And we can also have a non-traditional use of conditional operator. So sometimes the question mark is used as a replacement for if. For example, here is the non-traditional use of the conditional operator. So now depending on the condition, if our company is Netscape, either the first or the second expression after the question mark, that is the condition operator, gets executed and shows an alert. And we don't assign the result to a variable here. Instead, we execute different codes depending on the condition. And it's not recommended to use the question mark operator in this way. The notation is shorter than the equivalent if statement, which appeals to some programmers, but it is less readable. So the next topic is logical operators, and there are 4 logical operators in JavaScript. The first one is OR operator, second one is AND, third one is NOT, and last one is nullish coercing. And here we cover the I'm only going to tell you about the first 3 operators. So let's see the first one, the OR operator. So there are 4 possible logical combinations of the OR operator. I want to give an example of all 4. So here, if a condition is, if both the conditions are true, result is true. If one of the condition is true, it's true. And this is the same as the above. And this, if both the conditions are false, then it is false. So we can see that the result is always true except for the case when both operands are false. So if an operand is not a boolean, it's converted to a boolean for evaluation. So for instance, the number 1 is treated as true and 0 as false. So let me give you an example. Let's say 1 or 0 dot check. Okay, so let's try it out. So it says truth. So most of the time OR is used in an if statement to test if any of the given condition is true. So let me give you an example. See here I have initialized a variable R. Its initial value is 9 and I set the condition and I set the alert. So let's save it and let's check it out. See, it says the office is closed because the variable was 9. And we can use it, we can even get a user to give the value, but I haven't started here. So, and we can pass more conditions. So we can even pass more conditions here. Let's save it and let's check it out. See where it says the office is closed. Now that is because I set this variable as true. So if any of the condition is true, that it is weekend was true, so it will give us the alert the office is closed. And the logic described here is now it brings extra features with JavaScript. So OR operator, so a value is returned in its original form without the conversion. So in other words, a chain of OR returns the first truth value or the last one if no truth value is found. So the next one is AND operator. So the AND operator is represented with 2 ampersands, and so the AND operator is represented by 2 ampersands. And in a classical programming, AND returns true if both operands are true and false otherwise. So if both are true, then only if both conditions are true, we will get the true answer. Otherwise, if any one of the condition is false, it will give us false. So let me give you an example. So here I have set a variable R which has value 12 and a minute that is value 30. So if R is equal to 12 and minute is equal to 30, it will give us the time. So let's save it and check this out. This is the time is 12:30. So just as with OR, any value is allowed as an operand of and finds the posterior value. So if there are multiple ANDs, so it evaluates the operands from left to right. So for each, let me show you an example of multiple AND operator, and here are multiple AND operators. So the rules are similar to OR. The difference is that AND returns the first false value while OR returns the first truth one. Okay. So the next one is NOT operator, and the boolean NOT operator is represented with an exclamation sign. So its syntax is pretty simple. An example. See right over here, I have the NOT operator. This exclamation mark is a NOT operator. So the operator accepts a single argument and does and it does only two things, that is converts the operand to boolean type, that is true or false, and returns the inverse value. So here if it is not true it's false, and if it is not false it's true. And a double not is sometimes used for converting a value to boolean type. First one was that the Navish coalescing operator, that was a double question mark. So the Navish coalescing operator is written as two question marks, and as it treats null and undefined similarly, we have used a special term here in this video. So we will say that an expression is defined when it's neither null nor undefined. So the result of a nurturing operator B is if A is defined then A, and if A is undefined then B. So in other words, nurturing operator returns the first argument if it's not null or undefined, otherwise the second one. So the nullish nurturing operator isn't anything completely new, it's just a nice syntax to get the first defined value of a2. And we can write the result is equals to A nurturing operator B using the operators that we already know. And now it should be clear that nurturing operator does, and let's see where it helps. So the common use case of nurturing operator is to provide a default value for the potentially undefined variable. So for example, here if we show user is defined, otherwise anonymous, let me show you an example. See here, if we show user is defined and otherwise it is anonymous. So let's try to run it, and it should show anonymous because the user is not defined. So it shows anonymous because the user is not defined. And if we say that the user is defined, let's see user. See here now the user is defined. So it shows us the user. So we can also use a sequence of nurturing operator to select the value, first value from a list that isn't null or undefined. Let's say we have a user data in variable. Now let's give another example. So now let's say we have a user's data in variable first name, last name, and nickname, and all of them may not be defined if the user decided not to enter a value. So we would like to display the user name using one of these variables, or show anonymous if all of them aren't defined. So let's say, and let's try it out. See, it says supercoder because nickname was defined. This one was defined. So this was all about the nurturing operator. So the next topic is loops, and there are two types of loops that we can use in JavaScript. Those are while and for. So we often need to repeat actions. So for example, outputting goods from a list one after another, or just running the same code for each number from 1 to 10. And loops are a way to repeat the same code multiple times. So the first one is a while loop, and let me give you an example of a while loop. So let's say initialize a variable I with value 0, and then I use the while loop, and here I put my condition, and then I initialize. Now it shows error for I, and then I does this increase the value of I every time it gets executed. So let's check it out. See, first it says 0, this was the initial value, and it says 1, then 2, so 3 values, 0, 1, 2, because my condition was less than 3. So a single execution of the loop body is called an iteration, and the loop in this example makes 3 iterations. So if this hyperspace was not there, so the loop would repeat forever. That is in theory, but in practical the browser provides ways to stop such loops, and in server-side JavaScript we can kill the process. And any expression or variable can be a loop condition, not just comparisons, and the condition is evaluated and converted to a boolean by while. So for example, if we want to write that while I is not equal to 0, we can simply write while I. So let me give you an example. Let's say write while I is equal to 3, and I'll just write while I and alert I. And so here when I becomes 0, the condition becomes false, the loop will stop. We don't have to write while I is equal to 0. So let's test. So first one was 3, 2, 1, and when it's 0, the loop stops. The next one is the do while loop. So the do while loop is a part of a while loop. So the condition check can be moved below in the loop body using the do while syntax. So let me give you an example. Let's say while I is equals to 0, do alert I and I plus plus, and in my while statement the condition is given last in do while. So here is my condition that while is less than 3. Let's save it. Now check it out. See, it says 0, 1 and 2. So this form of syntax should only be used when you want the body of the loop to execute at least once. So do while loop execute once, that is minimum, regardless of the condition being true or false. So usually the other form is preferred, that is while, that we only use while. Next is the for loop. So the for loop is more complex, but it's the most commonly used loop. And let me give you an example for a for loop. So let's say for, and you can try anything here. This is my initializer, here where I set my variable, and then after the semicolon we give condition, and then after that we use the iteration. So how many times it should work. So for a single sheet we don't need curly braces, but it's good to use those as we have learned. So let's try to run it. See, it says 0, 1 and 2. So our loop is working correctly. And so first one is the beginning part that we have used. So it executes once upon entering the loop. The next one is the condition, and this is alert is the body, and this is called step. So now if you want to break a loop, for breaking a loop, a break statement is used. Let me give you an example. See, here I've initialized sum, a variable sum, and its value is 0, and while the condition is true, we initialize another value, another variable that is named value, and we use break statement to break through the loop. So wherever we need to break the loop, we can simply write a break statement with a semicolon. So let's save it. see here how. So let's test it out. See, the first one we are going to give a number. So let's say I give 9. So it works completely fine. But if we don't give a number, the loop will break here. So this is how it's done. So we can give any amount of numbers till we give it a null value and the loop will break. The next thing is a switch statement. So a switch statement can replace multiple if checks. So it gives a more descriptive way to compare a value with multiple variants. And the switch has one or more case blocks and an optional default. So let me give you an example of a switch statement. So here is switch and these are my cases. So here the switch starts to compare A from the first case variant, that is 3, and the match fails because our value in A is 4. So then choose 4, so that's a match. So the execution starts from case 4 until the nearest break, and if there is no break, then the execution continues with the next case without any checks. So let's try to run this. See here, our case 4 was executed, that's it, exactly. So if we remove the breaks, see, so here if we remove the break statement, we will see sequential execution of alert. So let me show you. It says exactly 2 bit and I don't know such value. So anything without the break, anything that other cases will get executed. So now the next thing is grouping of cases. So several variants of case which share the same code can be grouped. So for example, if we want the same code to run for case 3 and case 5. Let's just like this. So now what we are going to do is simply so right here is an example of grouping of the cases. Here I have grouped 2 cases. So now in both 3 and 5 will show the same message. And the ability to group cases is a side effect of how switch case works without break. So here the execution of case 3 starts from this line and goes through case 5 because there's no break. And now the next thing is type matters. So let's emphasize that the equality check is always strict, so the values must be of the same time to match. For example, let's consider this code over here. So for the 0, 1, 0 and 1, the first alert runs, and for 2, the second alert runs, but for 3, the result of the prompt string is 3, which is not strictly equal to the number 3. So we have got a dead code in case 3 and the default variant will execute. So let's try to run this. Let's start from the beginning. Let's say 0. So 1 of 0, that was our first alert. And let's say 1. So 1 and 0 will show the same alert. And let's type 2. so it should say 2 plus, and now let's say 3, so it shows an unknown value. See right over here, the default variant will execute because the third result of the from things tree, which is not strictly equal to the number 3, so it never executes. So the next topic is functions. So quite often we need to perform a similar action in many places of the script. So for example, we need to show a nice looking message when a visitor logs in or logs out, and maybe some errors. So functions are the main building blocks of the program. They allow the code to be called many times without repetition. And we have already seen examples of built-in functions like alert, message, prompt, message, and confirm questions. So, but we can create functions of our own as well. So the first thing is we need to have a function declaration. So for function, so to create a function, we can use a function declaration. So which looks something like so this is how we declare a function. So the function keyword goes first, and then goes the name of the function. So here is my function keyword, and this is the name of my function, and then a list of parameters between the parentheses. So and finally the code of the function, also named the function body, between the curly braces. So new function here, as you can see, it's called show message. So for example, I create a function here like function, and this is my function body. So let's try to run it. So here it says hello everyone, and this was our show message function. So the call here was show message, which executes the code of the function, and here you see the message 2 times as we saw it. So here we clearly did mistakes found the main purpose of the function, and to avoid code duplication. So if you ever need to change the message or the way it is shown, it's enough to modify the code in one place and the function which outputs it. Now the second one is local variables. So a variable declared inside the function is only visible inside that function. So let me give you an example. So here is a function show message, and here is my message. So let's try save it, and now let's try to run our code. See here it says hello, I'm Javascript. So this was our message, and then show message was called at the right address. So the second one next is outer variable. So a function can access an outer variable as well. So for example, see here I set a vector. So this here is how we can declare outer variables, and let's save it. So let's try to run it. See here it says hello John, and the function has full access to the outer variable. It can modify it as well, and the outer variable is only used if there's no local one, and if a same name variable is declared inside the function, then it shuts. So it shadows the outer function. For instance, let me show you an example which uses a local username. So here's an example which shows. So here the outer function is ignored. Let me Okay, see here it says hello Bob and John. So hello Bob was shown here. So this is how it's done. And the next one is parameters. So we can pass arbitrary data to function using parameters. And let me show you an example. So here when the function is called, so here when a function is called, the given values are copied to local variable from context, and then the function uses them. Let me save it and show you its execution. See it says hello and what's up. It was hello and what's up. It was shown. So the next one is default values, and it is that if a function is called but an argument is not provided, then the corresponding values become undefined. So there's not an error, and such a call would output and is undefined, and as the value text isn't passed, becomes undefined. So we can specify the so-called default value for a parameter to the function declared using equal to sign. So let me show you something where I use equal to sign. Let's save it. So now if the text parameter is not passed, it will get the value no text given. So the text parameter was not given, so it's no text given. So here no text given is a string, but it can be a more complex expression which is only evaluated and decided if the parameter is missing. The next one is alternative default parameter. So sometimes it makes sense to assign default values for parameters and not in the function declaration but at a later stage. And we can check if the parameter is passed during function execution by comparing it with undefined. Or we could use the OR operator. Next one is returning a value. So function can return a value back into the calling code as a result. And the simplest example would be the sum of two values. See here, the value is returned to the function itself, and the relative return can be in any place of the function. When the execution reaches it, the function stops and the value is returned to the calling code. So let me run it. See here it says 3, which is the sum of 1 and 2. So this sum was my function, and I called sum of 1 and 2, and the result was given back. So it is also possible to use return without a value, and that causes the function to exit immediately. So here if check age, see here if check age returns false, then the show only won't proceed and alert. Okay, so won't run. And the next one is naming a function. So functions are actions, so their name is usually a verb, and it should be brief and accurate as possible to describe what the function does, so that someone reading the code gets an indication about the function that we say that show movie. So it is a widespread practice to start a function with a verb or prefix which vaguely describes the action. There must be an agreement within the team on the meaning of the prefixes. For instance, function start with show, usually show, so that is using show. So it usually shows something, and function starts with get returns a value, and function starting with calculate something, and create something, check something, and return or boolean, etc. So the next one is functions comments. So function should be short and do exactly one thing, and if the thing is big, maybe it's worth to spread it into function into a new smaller functions. So sometimes following this rule may not be that easy, but it's definitely a good thing. And the separate function is not easier to test and debug. It's very distance is a big comment. So for instance, compare the two functions. Let me show you, give you an example. So for instance, here we compare two functions, show primes n, and below each one outputs the prime numbers up to n. Okay, so it just shows us the next prime up to n. And now, and the second variant is with addition, that is prime, to test for prime b. So here I created a function that shows prime, and it also calls the function as prime. So here I will create a function called is prime.